Nah, once we get going, you're gonna like it, I told him. I don't know, Jimmy said. I'm not the world's greatest swimmer. Nobody's going swimming, I said. The water's so cold you get hypothermia in a couple of minutes. Hypo who? Jimmy said. Hypothermia, I said. It's when your body temperature falls really low. Most people who die when they fall in the water die from that, not from drowning. I think Jimmy would have jumped back onto the dock if we hadn't sailed away right then. Ooh, my hat, Mrs. Tubman cried as we got going. The wind took my hat. We watched as it slowly drifted down into the water. Sorry, Jean, Dad said. You should have pinned it to your hair. I didn't know, Mrs. Tubman said. Now you do, Dad told her. What do they mean by pinned it to her hair? Not actual safety pins, that would hurt, right? But I bet some of you girls have used bobby pins before to kind of hold your hair down. That's what I think he was talking about with his hat. Really like that hat, Mrs. Tubman mumbled. I don't think Dad heard her. He was at the tiller, which is the stick that steers the boat. Soon we were moving along really fast. For a sailboat, I liked the whoosh, whoosh sound as the boat cut through the water. Dad relaxed a little, and so did the rest of us. We held our faces up to the sun to catch a few rays. Don't forget to use plenty of suntan lotion, Grandma said. Sheila slathered it all over herself, and by the time she was done, she smelled like a coconut factory. I never burned, Jimmy told Grandma. Me either, I said. Aren't you lucky, Grandma said. We sailed along that way for an hour before Dad called, Anybody ready for lunch? Yes, we all answered at once. We dropped anchor near a small island, and I handed out our lunch bags. Jimmy had brought his favorite. I bet you know what it is. Sardines and onions on rye. The rest of us had cold chicken left over from last night's dinner. Am I hungry, Jimmy said, gobbling up one sardine and onion sandwich and starting on the next. Me too, Sheila said. I've never been so hungry in my entire life. It's the salt air, Grandma said. It does wonders for your appetite. The three of us polished off a bag of chips, a box of cookies, and all the juice. Then we hit the fruit. Don't stuff yourselves, Grandma told us. It's better to eat lightly when you're sailing. But we're anchored now, Jimmy said, helping himself to his second peach. Grandma just raised her eyebrows. After lunch, we relaxed for a little. Dad took a snooze. Grandma and Mrs. Tubman had a heavy discussion about the problems of our city. Mr. Tubman read a mystery, and the three of us played hearts with the deck of cards that Sheila had brought in her pack. I'm always prepared, she told us. A couple of hands in, Sheila said, Speaking of prepared, is there a bathroom on this boat? Look around, I told her. Do you see a bathroom? Since we're in an open boat, it didn't take much to figure out the answer to that question. Well, what's a person supposed to do? What's a person supposed to do, she asked. A person is supposed to go before. I did. Then a person is supposed to wait until we're back. She checked her watch. That's almost 2 more hours. If it's an emergency, Dad has a bucket, I told her. A bucket? Sheila said. That's disgusting, Jimmy and I sang at the same time. Just when I think it's possible for the two of you are human beings, you prove that I am wrong. Sheila's outburst woke Dad. He checked his watch. We better get started. We'll be heading into the wind on the way back, so it'll take even a little bit longer. Once we're underway, it felt a lot colder than before. We pulled in our sweatshirts. Sheila shivered and moved closer to me. I moved away from her and closer to Jimmy. It got more and more windy as the sky filled with big gray clouds. The boat tipped and water splashed over the rails, spraying us. That's when Jimmy grabbed my arm and said, I feel funny. Dad, I called. Jimmy feels funny. Keep your eye on the horizon, Dad told him. What horizon? Jimmy asked as his eyes were rolling around in their sockets and he was turning green. Grandma said, breathe through your nose, Jimmy. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. There were waves now with white caps and the boat tipped way over and Sheila screamed, do something before we all drown. It's all right, Grandma said. This is a keel boat. It can't go over. It can't go over, I told myself. It can't go over. Jimmy was trying to breathe through his nose. Like Grandma said, I think he was getting more scared than sick. A puff is coming, Warren, Grandma called. A puff of what? Sheila cried, grabbing me. A puff of wind, Grandma said. Look at the water. You can see how it's rippling in front of us. Then she shouted to Dad, Warren, head up in the puff. All of a sudden, the boat, which was already tipped halfway over, tipped so far the sails touched the water. The Tubman screamed and clung onto each other. Sheila dug her fingernails into my hand, and Jimmy groaned and hung on to me. He breathed his sardines and onions right into my face. Let Muriel take the tiller, Mrs. Tubman yelled. You want Muriel to be the captain, Dad said. Fine. Really, Warren, Grandma said, you're overreacting. But she switched places with him and took the tiller, shouting out orders. Ease the sheets, Warren. We're going to sail off the wind. It may take a little while longer, but we'll all be more comfortable. The boat straightened up and sailed more smoothly. Jimmy released his grip on me, and so did Sheila. Her nails left a mark on my hand. The Tubmans breathed more easily, and Dad sulked or pouted. Grandma sailed the boat like a pro. She explained everything as she did it to make us feel more secure. Now, as we pull up, Warren will jump onto the dock, she said, and while he ties us up, I'll drop the sail. She looked over at Dad. Wait for me to give you the signal, Warren. But Dad didn't wait. He jumped too soon and landed in the water. Person overboard, Sheila shouted. Mrs. Tubman and I remembered our responsibilities, and we pointed at Dad. We pointed at some guy from the dock reaching into the water and pulled him out. We pointed at someone else, wrapped him in a blanket, and we pointed until Dad looked at all of us and called, okay, that's enough. You can stop pointing now. He was shivering so hard that his teeth clicked. Mr. Fargo picked us up in his trunk, and as soon as we pulled into the driveway, Sheila jumped out and ran for the house. I have to go so bad. Did you all have a nice sail, Mom asked the rest of us, and then she noticed Dad. Warren, how come you went swimming in your clothes? Dad didn't answer. I'll be in the tub, he answered, heading for the house. Mom looked at Grandma. She asked, oh, the usual, Grandma said, but all's well that ends well. Fudge jumped off the porch. All's well that ends well, he sang. I see he's recovered, I said to Mom. More or less. Then Tootsie toddled over and held her hands out up to me. Up, P, up. I picked her up. She was barefooted, and the bottoms of her feet were covered with blue. Did you get more blueberries? I asked Mom. No. Why? Look at Tootsie's feet. Oh, Mom said. We ran to the side yard where Mr. Fargo had left his work. Mom sucked in her breath when she saw the path of little footprints across his painting. What are we going to do? I asked. What can we do? Mom said. Mr. Fargo and Jimmy came around the house then. Jimmy was telling him about his sailing adventure. I was never scared, he said. I knew it was a keelboat. I knew it couldn't go over. He stopped when he saw us and gave me a weak smile. Peter wasn't scared either, he added. But Mr. Fargo wasn't listening anymore. He'd seen the little footprints across his painting. His face turned purple. I held Tootsie tight and I waited for the explosion. Frank? Mom began, but Frank held up his hand to stop her speaking. He got down on all fours and crawled around the canvas. He stood up and walked away from it. Then he got closer, and then he walked away, and then he came close again, and then he squinted, and then he scratched his beard. We all held our breaths. Finally, he muttered, baby feet. I looked at Jimmy, and he shrugged as if to say, don't ask me. Baby feet, or Charlotte feet. Stay there, Charlotte. Mr. Fargo said, again coming toward me as I backed away. He wasn't getting his hands on my little sister. Itsy bitsy baby feet, Mr. Fargo cooed. Charlotte, please don't go down there. Itsy bitsy teensy weensy baby feet, and he tickled the bottom of Tootsie's feet, and she squealed. Then he laughed. Mr. Fargo actually laughed. How'd you like to be my partner, Tootsie Pie? She held her arms out to him, and he swung her up into the air. I think we've got something here, he told her. I think those little baby feet of yours are going to be a big hit. None of us knew what he was talking about, but we were all relieved. That night, after supper, Jimmy and I used up a whole jar of Noxzema. It's this little blue cream that you put on your faces. We had sunburned faces, necks, and ears, and our ears hurt more than anything. Those tops of your ears will hurt so bad with sunburn. Why didn't you guys use any suntan lotion, Mom said. I never burned, Jimmy said. Famous last words, Grandma said. Then Dad, who had supper in his room, came down in his robe. He had clinked a spoon against a glass and said, I'd like your attention for a minute, and everyone stopped and looked at him. I behaved very badly this afternoon, he said, and I want to apologize to everyone on the boat, but especially to Muriel, who saved the day. Apology accepted, Grandma said. I was proud of Dad for admitting that he acted like a sore loser. So when he looked over at me, I gave them the high sign and smiled. Then Mr. Fargo clicked a spoon against his glass, and he stood up and said, and I want to thank Tootsie for walking across my canvas and for giving me the idea of a series of paintings called Baby Feet. Here, here, Buzzy Sr. said, raising his coffee cup. Let's have a toast to Baby Feet and to Muriel, who always saves the day. And he gave Grandma a big kiss. Grandma blushed. Buzzy, she said, not in front of the children, but somehow I don't think Grandma meant us as the children. I think she meant Mom and Dad and Mr. and Mrs. Tubman because they were the only ones who looked surprised by that kiss. And that is the end of chapter 12. I'll see you again tomorrow for chapter 13 and then chapter 14. We're almost done with Fudge-A-Mania. Can you believe it? But that means closer to Devil Fudge. Bye. I miss you.